we need to talk about this song. Well, I need to talk about this song because All I Want for Christmas Is You by Mariah Carey is a statistical anomaly. When this song became a #1 Billboard hit in the year 2019, that was 25 years after its release in 1994. But here is the more interesting thing. When that song also became the Billboard #1 song in the year 2020, Mariah Carey became the first and only artist in the history of the Billboard charts to have a #1 hit in each of 4 decades: 1990s, 2000s, 2010s, and then the 2020s. Now, that might seem like a fluke. You might say, well, yeah, the 2019-2020 thing was because of the Spotify streaming thing happening with the Billboard charts and it was all a bit weird. Here's the thing about Mariah Carey. Mariah Carey is not famous because of All I Want for Christmas. Mariah Carey has 19 #1 Billboard hits. Mariah Carey is a single #1 hit away from being on par with the only other band in the history of recorded music to have more #1 hits than her. She is one #1 hit away from being on par with the Beatles. Here is another extraordinary thing about this particular song though. If we look inside the statistics of the Recording Industry Association of America, among the top 10 holiday and Christmas songs in its records, All I Want for Christmas is a 12-time multi-platinum song, which puts it more than double the sales of the song that comes next in that list. If we look at that list and think of this like an Olympic sprint, where all the sprinters are crossing the finish line within microseconds of each other, Mariah Carey has already crossed the finish line and is making herself a cup of tea. This song is exceptional. And in this video, I am talking to songwriters and I want to tell songwriters 3 really important things they need to know about this song. And the third thing is where we're really actually going to dive into some of the musical components of this song that are so interesting and so underrated and also so usable. The first thing that I want every songwriter to know and understand about this song requires a little bit of context and history about when and why this song was recorded. Mariah Carey released her debut album, Mariah Carey, in the year 1990 when she was just 21 years old. She then married Tommy Mottola, the chairman and CEO of Sony Music, her record label at the time, when she was just 24 years old in the year 1993. And All I Want for Christmas Is You came out the following year in 1994 when Mariah Carey was just 25 years old. Here's the thing about this song and a lot of her #1 songs of that era, which include Dream Lover and Hero. These are songs that feel like a glitter festival. But Mariah Carey's marriage was a very unhappy one, and it's very well documented in her own autobiography. But to summarize, she was essentially very bullied and controlled by Tommy Mottola. He monitored and controlled and surveilled her. She wasn't allowed to leave her own house without permission and without supervision. And this marriage, understandably, came off the back of a very unhappy childhood. Mariah Carey has documented her experience of her childhood as being abused, neglected, and in a constant state of fear and insecurity. I was a little girl who lived in shacks, who always felt unsafe, undercared for, lonely, and perpetually scared. This is the context in which Mariah Carey sat down and on a Casio keyboard wrote the song All I Want for Christmas Is You. When we understand a bit about the context of the song, it suddenly goes from feeling like this sugary, sweet, bow tie apple pie of a song to something that actually feels quite sad and lonely. It feels like an expression of a fantasy. And if we contextualize it with some of her other songs that really talk about this idea of wanting something that she doesn't have, it's really a cry for help. So one of the first things that I really want songwriters to understand about songwriting is that your songs don't need to be direct reportage from the autobiographical fact of your life. There can be emotional truth to your songs, even when you're not using the autobiographical facts. I think a much deeper truth for songwriters and a much more creative place to come from is to come from a sense of emotional truth rather than factual truth. It's not about write what you know, it's about write what you can imagine. Here is the second extremely important thing that I want songwriters to understand about this song, but more importantly, about this song as it represents Mariah Carey's catalogue of songs and Mariah Carey herself. Mariah Carey wrote this song. She also wrote 18 out of the 19 number one hits that she has had so far. Mariah Carey is one of the biggest selling female artists of all time, not simply because she has one of the most extraordinary voices of our generation, not only because of her brand, but also because she is an extraordinary songwriter. You may have logged into this video thinking that I was going to all over Mariah Carey. That is not the case at all. I think Mariah Carey is one of the most underrated and underappreciated songwriters of the last 30 years. Mariah Carey did not stumble upon hits. She dedicated herself to understanding the craft and to practicing the deliberate and conscious application of the things that she was learning to her songwriting. For songwriters out there, and particularly singer-songwriters and artists who are writing their own songs, this is incredibly important because even though it might be necessary to have a great voice or a great brand, neither of those things are sufficient to really cut through the noise, and certainly not to cut through the noise over the long term and have career longevity. The only thing that will give you that is great songs and great songwriting. Now let's talk about some of the musical elements in the song itself. There are a few things happening in the chords and melody chord relationship that make this song so interesting and so much more complex and sophisticated than I think it can just seem if you're just a listener. But for us as songwriters, we want to bridge that gap between merely listening to songs and having the feelings, and always ask ourselves, how is the songwriter achieving that? And how can I use that in my own songs and songwriting? So here is how that first verse goes. I don't want a lot for Christmas, there is just one thing I need. I don't care about the presents underneath the Christmas tree. Okay, so, whoa, this chord is what we call the 4 minor chord. Now, anyone who's played lots of songs and, lots of Beatles songs, for example, is well familiar with the 4 minor chord, but it is not a chord in the key of G major. And anytime you put the 4 minor chord in a major key, it really yanks on the heartstrings and it really injects a kind of darkness and melancholy into the song. And there it is. What's unusual about this song is not just the use of the 4 minor chord, but its constant use, its repetitive use. It comes back over and over again. But one thing that people don't really talk about is what's actually happening with this chord when it's used in the chorus on the hook line. All I want for Christmas is you. Right, so what's happening here on the hook line is it's going from just the 2 minor chord, then it goes to that 4 minor chord again, but the note that she sings on Christmas is this note, which actually turns this 4 minor chord into a 4 minor 6 chord. Here is a regular 4 minor, even 4 minor 7 chord. Sound kind of smooth, kind of nice, but a 4 minor 6 chord is really angular. One of the things that makes it angular is that any time you have the 6 inside that chord, what you get right here in the middle of the chord is an interval called a tritone. The tritone interval is the most dissonant interval in Western music. The tritone interval is the thing that creates the most tension, and in this case, releases in an interesting way, but releases back to the G chord. But the chord containing that tritone is so full of tension, and it's not just your normal 4 minor chord, it's an extra tense 4 minor chord. Now, one final thing that I want to mention about this moment musically in the song is that Mariah Carey and her doo-wop choir literally sing that tritone on that hook. All I want for Christmas, Christmas, Christmas with boop, boop, boop. That is a tritone. The hook contains the most dissonant interval in Western music. That is really unusual and really creates this incredible sense of tension that delivers the release. If you've made it this far into the video, I think it's probably because you're really a songwriter and are genuinely interested in some of the musical things happening in this song. So this last bit is really for you because there are some other really interesting chord things going on, particularly inside the chorus of this song. And I want to point out a few of them because they are usable, they are beautiful, and you can use them to write your own song, your own Christmas song, it doesn't matter. They are musical concepts that aren't specific to this song. They're in this song, but they're in lots of songs. But I want to point them out to you, firstly, so you can appreciate how wonderful and beautifully constructed this song really is, but also how usable these things are and use them in your own songs and songwriting because they're very fun sounds. I just want you for my own, more than you could ever know. Make my wish come true. All I want for Christmas is you. So what is happening here? Some really cool things. So she starts on the G. The next thing that happens is a really beautiful chord combination. She's targeting this chord up here. This is just the 6th minor chord in the key of G, which is E minor. But she doesn't go straight from G to E minor. She goes to G and E minor via this chord, which is a B dominant 7 chord. So she targets the E minor chord with what's called its secondary dominant. So don't worry about confusing musical lingo. All you need to understand is that you can create this kind of really beautiful, bright lift into the darkness of that E minor chord by playing B dominant 7 first. Think of these two chords as partner chords. They belong together. B7 before E minor kind of always sounds magical and beautiful, and it sounds like bright to dark, which is so nice. So that's the first lovely musical thing that happens there. Then we have this little walk down. So again, she's actually going from 6 minor to this chord here, which is actually just an inversion of G. I'm going to use my thumb to get G there. So it's actually just a G chord. I'm just playing D in the bass. So she's just going from 6 back to 1, but there's this cool little walk down. So it's a chromatic walk down, and the way that I've heard it and the way that I've voiced it, and a way that's always good to do little chromatic walk downs, is to play a diminished chord, which looks like this on the guitar. So playing a diminished chord goes down to whatever the next chromatic note is down there. So let's put that together again. So now we're here, and the next line of this is, make my wish come true. Right, this chord, what is this? Oh, so good. This is another one of these dominant chords that isn't strictly in the key of G. This is an E dominant 7 chord, but it is also a partner chord. It is also a secondary dominant chord that wants to go always down to the 2 minor. So this beautiful blend of bright to darker is such a characteristic of this song and gives it a kind of musical sophistication that is deceptively simple, right? Like it's actually kind of beautiful and complex, but also totally accessible if you understand what's going on and you can hear those chord moves. So we've got this chord to this chord, and now we're at the hook. All I want for Christmas is you. Down. So then we're back at the hook. So fun. So we've done that whole round. Let's do it one more time. I just want you for my own, more